We are going to talk about the 1AR today. This is the second hardest speech in debate. If you were here for Michaela's fabulous 2&R elective, then you've already heard about the most difficult speech in debate, and now you're going to hear about the second most difficult speech in debate. I'd apologize to 2As, but I'm not sorry at all. Being a 2A is just doing a speech event, so being a 1A and a 2N is way more difficult. But while you're doing the 1AR, your job really is to do the following two things, right? Your job is to do two things. One is to make the 2&R's life difficult. Two is to make the 2AR's life easy, right? Pretty straightforward. Those are the two things that you're worried about when you're giving 1AR is how can I make it more difficult for the 2N to do all of these crazy things that this 2N wants to do? And how can I make it way easier for my 2A partner to lie, cheat, and steal as much as they want to in their final speech here? Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to need to do a couple of things. First is that we need to always trust all of our instincts. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bunch of Slack messages for some reason. I think this is the most important thing. Why am I getting so many Slack messages? Leave me alone. I think this is the most important thing for the 1AR always is to trust your instincts. Okay? Trust your instincts. What that means is you should not be wasting time and you should not ever be second guessing yourself, especially during a 1AR itself. Okay, all the time I watch 1As, make their arguments on case and then kind of pause for a second and clearly have that moment of, oh, did I answer everything? Did I actually make all the arguments I wanted to? Did I say the stuff that I wanted to? No, you do not have time to do that. You have to know that you are right and do it and move on. Another way that this can kind of be worded is that you kind of need to have a killer instinct, right? You need to say, I have done the thing. I have done what I need to do. I'm moving on with my life. Right? So you kind of need to have a like, boom, boom, I said the words next. Boom, boom, said the words next. Right? That throughout the flow or whatever flows you're talking about, because the more that you pause and the more that you start to second guess yourself, the easier it is for your 1AR to then get spread out by the block. Right? If we're all 1As in here, we're also 2Ns. And we recognize that a huge part of what the block is doing because of the time differential, right? 13 minutes of negative block versus 5 minutes of the 1AR. A huge part of what you're doing in the block is making the 1AR's life incredibly difficult, making it tough for the 1A to be able to cover things. And it becomes really easy to overwhelm 1As who are not trusting their instincts and are second guessing themselves and wondering, have I actually said enough here? Have I read enough cards? Have I done what I need to do? So trust your instincts. Know that you've done what you need to do. Move on. 2, be strategic. And by this, I mean, do not, under any circumstance, ever, period, full stop, extend everything the 2AC says. Don't even extend most of what the 2AC says, in fact. Okay, if the 2AC has made 8 answers to a disadvantage, you are required to extend 2, maybe 3. 3 is like really pushing it. Like, oh my God, that block must have been terrible if you think you can extend 3 arguments. 2, pretty much max. Okay, 1As who stand up and are like, I am extending 5 answers to the disadvantage, get demolished by any 2N who knows what's going on, because whatever happened in that block is going to overwhelm whatever you're going to do in the 5 seconds that you're spending on each of those arguments in the 1AR. And then it becomes useless. Right? So instead, you want to pick, you have to make choices in the 1AR, right? You have to be strategic. You want to pick and choose and make sure that you've got what you think and your partner think are the best answers to whatever that position is. So part of that then means that when we're being strategic, we're thinking about what the 1AR is doing before the debate even begins. A whole bunch of affirmative prep is prepping the 1AR. Right? So when your partner's writing the app and you're talking with your partner, like, hey, here's what I think makes a lot of sense. Your partner's like, yeah, I really like this idea. You kind of get on the same page. Cool. You got a strategy figured out. That strategy is not just, oh, we figured out the 2AC card we're going to read. That strategy is also, we know what the 1AR is going to say. And we know then how the 2AR is going to extend what that 1AR has said and kind of put the debate together. And this has to be a conversation before a tournament starts and or in pre-round. So that you can do this, right? So you don't extend all 2AC arguments. You don't even extend most 2AC arguments. You extend like 2 on each page, probably max. Right, so when I was debating, my last year was a climate policy topic, right? And so people loved going for the state's counter plan. And my partner and I were, and I still kind of am convinced that the state's counter plan is cheating. And so our strategy against states in all instances, full stop, it did not matter what the block said, was going to be theory. Right, we gave so many 1AR, 2ARs on theory, and just like, we got really good at it. It was the thing that made the most sense to us, right? So, 1NC reads the state's counter plan. We're like, cool, we know what the 2AR is going to be. 2NC is extending the state's counter plan. I'm like, cool, I know what the 1AR is going to be. So we were strategic, right? In that instance, we would extend, I don't know, we might like shadow extend a permutation just to mess with the 2N's head a little bit. But like, basically all I did in the 1AR was theory, right? So the 2AC would have like 9 answers to the state's counter plan. 1AR was 1 argument. Because we were being strategic. We had talked about what we thought the strategy should be and decided that's what made the most sense for us. Part of this then means that you need to have effective partner communication. Okay, you should be talking with your partner a lot. You, as the 1A, should be involved in AF construction and AF strategy conversations. Once again, demonstrative of how being a 2N 1A is so much more difficult than being a 2A, because you have to also help write the AF in order to make sure you know what to do for the 1AR. The 1AR should read cards. Right, obviously in places where they make sense. Like the theory example I just gave, you're not going to read new cards in the 1AR. But if your strategy against politics is non-unique, right, which if I were all of you and I were debating about, if I were preparing to be affirmative against the farm bill disadvantage that's been put out at this camp, and I'm comfortable saying this because I was in charge of this group, I would be going for a non-unique argument. Because like uniqueness is like 98% F right now. Right, and so the 1AR, in order to make that uniqueness argument effectively, is going to have to read probably 2 to 3 new cards. Right, I assume that all of you are familiar with the 2x plus 1 strategy. Right, 2x plus 1 refers to the amount of cards that you want to read in response to the amount of arguments that the other team has said. Right, we're unlikely to be able to get to this in the 1AR, right? This is suggesting that you read like 9 new uniqueness cards in the 1AR, right? But you want to try and, like, that's a goal, it's an ideal, right? So you want to try and push yourself to read a bunch of new cards. I think on average, and it obviously depends on the debate, right? If you're if you are a non-topical affirmative, if you're a non-topical affirmative that's not trying to be topical, right? Like the strategy against you is going to be framework, then you're probably not going to read very many cards in the 1AR, right? But if you're, debating against the politics disadvantage, like the block is, or the block is like sui generis and the spillover disadvantage, right? Then you're going to need to read a bunch of cards, right? So obviously this is contingent, depends on your AF, depends on what's happening in the debate, right? But I think it's a good idea to try and force yourself to read a bunch of new cards. Admittedly, this should not trade off with analysis, right? So please don't just stand up and be like, they said uniqueness, here's 7 new cards. Like extend your 2AC card. You need to answer what the other team is saying. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that can look like in a second. But good 1As, if we're trying to make the 2NR's life difficult, are going to read new cards because that's a lot more difficult for that 2N to think about or to prepare to, negate than just saying, hey, I extended this 2AC card for 5 seconds. Everyone with me so far? Any questions? Cool. So I want to move to talking about actually getting the 1AR, right? So if we've kind of talked about how to think about the 1AR, right? This is your job. These are kind of the ways that you should approach what you're doing here. Actually, I'm just going to erase this. I don't like this other thing here. Then we're going to talk about now what to do when you're actually giving the 1AR. And the first thing I would say, and this is I think just so incredibly important, is that you follow 2AC order. Follow 2AC order. It is the worst as a judge when, I'm judging a debate, the 2AC is like, pretty well organized. The block has followed that 2AC order and their responses. And the 1AR stands up and it's just like, screw it, I'm going to do whatever I want. Like big L, huge L. If you're not following 2AC order, then what was the point of the structure that your partner has already put together for you? And it makes it so tough for your judge to follow along with what it is that you are trying to say. Especially given, we've already talked about this, you as the 1A need to trust your instinct, right? You're not having downtime in this speech. You are just going, right? Flowing the 1AR as a judge is difficult because good 1As are just doing their thing. So you, as the debater, want to make the judge's life a little bit easier in the 1AR and allow them to line up the arguments as they have been presented. So please, for the love of God, follow 2AC order. And by the way, when I say follow 2AC order, I mean follow 2AC order on each particular flow, right? You can answer flows or, put in your roadmap, the flows can be not the same order as the 2AC, that part's fine. But follow the order on the flow that has been presented. Right? So if you want to extend 2AC1 and 2AC6 and answer to the DA, then you should say, extend 2AC1, do all of your arguments there. Extend 2AC6, do all of your arguments there. Right? Please don't be like, drop down to 6 and then start doing your thing. Now go back up to 1, like every judge is going to hate you. Okay, so we're gonna follow the 2AC order. That's kind of super key. Second is we are not going to have overviews. We hate them. Overviews are the worst. Terrible. And they're especially bad in the 1AR because, again, as a 1A giving this speech, we are trusting our instincts and we're just going. Okay, to give an overview is to disrupt the judge's ability to follow along with all of the really cool stuff that you've got going on here. Also, just generally like the case overview thing that a whole bunch of people write and just read is just useless, right? If your judge is paying attention, they will know what your impact is by the 1AR. For the love of God, it's been like an hour of them listening to you and your partner and your opponents talk about how climate change causes extinction. Like, we understand that you have an affirmative that attempts to solve climate change. You do not need to repeat that at the top of your speech. If any of you know me, which I don't know if any of you do, but you know that I think that overviews are just terrible, period, in all instances. But like the 1AR especially, no, absolutely not. So if we're going to follow the 2AC order, we're not going to have any overviews. The way that we need to then extend things is as follows. Right, so we've got this is like a pretty basic acronym, right? This EAR thing, extend, answer, and read, right? I assume that all of you are at least vaguely familiar with this. If you're not, it's fine, it doesn't really matter too much. But the way that we're going to make this a little more specific is the following. We're going to say extend, so that's a 1, 2AC X, right? Whatever number argument is that you're extending, right? Because if your 2A is also doing their job, they will have numbered things in the 2AC, which makes it a lot easier to do this kind of stuff, right? Extend 2AC X. Claim, which is going to be about 3 to 5 words, right? Farm bill won't pass. Biden has no PC. Counterplan can't solve. Whatever, really quick. Please do not be super wordy about your claims. The reason we want to be quick and effective with it, again, 5 minutes. Right, so extend 2AC1. Farm bill won't pass because warrant. Right, we love a good warrant. We love when we actually explain what our arguments are instead of just saying the claim over and over again. Four is where we reference our evidence, right? That's why, right? That's Lepp. Notice, by the way, how we're referencing our evidence after we've already done the little extension, claim, and warrant piece. We are not going to extend by author name. We are instead going to extend by argument. Okay, that is more efficient. It is more effective. You want the judge to flow the argument that you're making rather than the author name. Especially in a world of paperless debate. And in the last like 2 to 3 years, we're seeing more frequently that judges will read all of the cards as the debate goes along. Right? It used to be that, when judges would wait to read the cards at the end of the debate. We're now seeing more and more often that they're reading the cards as you go along here. That makes it even less important for you to reference author names, because the judge has already kind of started to think about what reading the card can look like and do and mean for you, and makes it even more important that you're actually saying what the argument is. Also because the judge can basically call you out on your nonsense if you're wrong, right? So this is what you want them to write down: the claim and the warrant, not the author. We're obviously going to reference it, right? Because you've read a card. 5 is very quick evidence comparison / indicting. Right, this has to be fast. Obviously, it's the 1AR. You don't have a lot of time, but you want it here. You want to have some kind of evidence comparison or indicting in the 1AR so that your 2A can stand up and wax poetics about it, and it's not new. Right? It's very easy if you don't have this in your 1AR to lose a debate, because your 2A wants to stand up and say that your impact is so much bigger, it's so much more important. Or if you're, I guess a better example is like if you're debating against the CAPK, right? Your 2A wants to stand up and be like, you can't trust any of their authors. They're all Marxist hacks who are just hippies smoking weed. Like, we can't trust anything they have to say, right? And if the 2A wants to be able to do that, you need to say this before the 2AR, so it's not brand new. Okay, so you need to have some evidence comparison or indicting. And then we've got new cards. Yeah. Then we've got new cards. Everyone with me about kind of the structure of what this should look like? Right, notice how organized everything is so far, right? We have a structure for how things should look. You should follow structure when you're giving a 1AR. Also, when you're giving the 1AR, you need to consider where your focus needs to be. Where do you focus? Right, that's important for thinking about time allocation, for thinking about where you're going to need to read cards. I'm now sad that I erased this, but remember, you want to make the 2N's life sad face. You want to make the 2A's life happy face, right? So where do you focus? Case, probably not. Unless they're impact turning something or they're straight turning your advantage. Like if case is just in the block was like 3 minutes of defense, you can probably fly through that really quickly. If your 1AC cards are as good as they should be to be in a 1AC, then like, right, you can get through case pretty fast, usually. If your 1AC cards are not good enough to stand up to the onslaught of negative cards that are being read in response, then you need to get better 1AC cards. But admittedly, if they're impact turning something or if they're straight turning your advantage, then you probably do need to read new cards and spend more time here. But basically what I'm saying is that if the block on case has just been defense, get through this pretty quickly, right? There are more important places to spend your time. You want to predict the 2NR too. Right? You're all 2Ns. You also think like 2Ns. So in your 1AR prep, put on your 2N hat for a sec and think, okay, this is what the block did. Here's where I think they're going to go next. And honestly, like 9 times out of 10, it's pretty easy to do because 2Ns are pretty predictable. Right? Think about time. Did they spend 6 minutes talking about the politics disad in the 2NC? They probably want to go for the politics disad. Right? Was it in the 2NC or was it in the 1NR? Right? A fatal flaw of a lot of 2Ns is that we love to hear ourselves talk. And so whatever we put in the 2NC is oftentimes what is going to be in the 2NR. And we're like, yeah, 1N, just talk about whatever. I don't really care. Right? So those are some kind of shortcuts to think about this. So whatever you think, trust your instinct. And as a result, orient your focus around that thing. You can also think about what is the most concerning. Right? Again, if you and your partner have done affirmative prep correctly, you should know, against port clog, we are going to go for internal link defense. That clogging the ports just doesn't matter. Who cares? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. We've got great cards. We think we're right about this, and we therefore think that the app outweighs the DA. Right? In which case, then, you might think, well, this is what the 2N is going to go for, but God, their cards suck. This is silly. So maybe I'm only going to spend so much time here. And maybe I'm going to try and bait them into going for something else. Right? Speaking of, you might do some 1AR trickery. I don't know, this one's a little risky, but maybe. right? Where you kind of strategically undercover a bad position to try and trick that 2N into going for it. Right? Like, dear God, you high schoolers love to get shiny objected by things. This is a fight I have with the MBA debaters all the time. It's like, we cannot go for the freaking coercion K. No one cares. Like, I do not care if the 2AC dropped it. You are not going to win that debate because that is not an argument. And multiple times we have lost massive big debates on my 2N was like, oh, but they only said util in the 2AC against coercion. Like, I don't care. Right? Don't fall for tricks if you're a 2N, obviously. But then if you're a 1A, sometimes you do need to trick them. Right? If you're debating in front of someone who the K is just like basically a non-option, and that block for some reason extended the K, I am once again calling out my MBA debaters right now, then you should maybe trick that 2N into going for the critique. Or if that block is, if the negative wants to deploy a super complex counterplan strategy that requires them internal link turning the second scenario on your first advantage, but then conceding something else on a different advantage in order to get to that. And the whole time the block is happening, the judge is just like, while this is occurring, then like, yeah, maybe you should trick them into going for that because your judge does not know what's going on and is probably not going to vote for it. Right? Trickery is admittedly tough, right? Because you don't want to undercover things to the point where you lose if they go for that thing. You want to make sure you've got all the pieces for the 2AR, right? So when you're predicting what the 2NR is going to do, I would think more along these lines, especially this one, because again, 2Ns love to hear themselves dock and are just like, this 2NC was fire, I'm going for it, I don't care what anyone else says, right? So then the 1AR wants to demolish their ability to do that. But sometimes tricking them can help. Right, so where are you going to focus? Case, probably not so much. The only exception being if they have a bunch of offense on case. You're going to focus on what you think the 2NR is going to go for. And you're going to also focus on the must answers. This includes turns case arguments and framework on the critique. Right, if you in the 1AR concede that without the farm bill, 0 chance that the app does anything good, you're going to lose on presumption. Or if you in the 1AR concede that the judge has to, you link, you lose, the judge has to ignore all content of your affirmative, you're probably going to lose. Right, so make sure you've got those pieces also in where you're thinking about where do you focus. Right, don't drop turns case, don't drop framework on the K. Depending on what the block has said and depending on your judge, you can get through these things pretty quickly. But it's important that you focus on it. Any questions? Okay, cool. Some other things I want to talk about. There's so many. I'm a huge fan of 1AR blocks. Right? I think you should write 1AR blocks. Because doing so saves you so much time and mental energy in a debate that you can then use to focus on something else. Right? So like when my partner and I would go for theory against states, because he and I had conversations about what states against the, theory against the state's counterplan could or should look like so many times, we had basically perfected that block for the 1AR. Right, so then when I was like, cool, blocks extending states, I obviously need to flow, I need to know what they're saying, and I need to make sure that my 1AR is actually responsive to that, right? But it meant that I could then spend a lot more time and energy and focus on the disadvantage they were extending as the net benefit. right? So I think 1AR blocks are great. I think you should write them. Part of this then means that you should have the cards already. I don't know if this is a weird pet peeve, but one of my pet peeves as a judge is when the 2A sends out the cards that the 1A is going to read. Because that demonstrates to me that the 1A has no idea what's going on. If you, as the affirmative team, holistically are doing your job correctly, you should have the 1AR cards ready to go before the debate starts. Right? Obviously, there are exceptions. Sometimes someone hands you something in pre-round and they're just like, here, you have to read this, right? Or sometimes you're breaking a new app that you like don't really know all that much about. Sometimes the neg has a weird counterplan strategy that you and your partner didn't predict effectively. But like, come on, the politics DA, we all know what's happening here. So you should have those cards ready. You as the 1A should be sending out those cards, before your speech starts to the other team and the judge. The other really cool thing about 1AR blocks is that this is ready in pre-round. Which means you can save prep time. Right? This is also something that I don't understand, is why everyone feels like they need to take 9 minutes of prep for the 1AR. If you have done your job correctly and you know what our answers are going to be to whatever the position is, and you have prepared those answers effectively before the debate, then the only thing you should have to do in 1AR prep time is make sure that your answers to that whatever is happening are contextualized to how the block has said that thing. Okay, so when you're debating a politics DA, the 2AC happens. During cross-sects of the 2AC, you should think to yourself, okay, here's all the things that were in the 1NC. Let me pull all of the generic versions of my 1AR blocks and put those in a file. So I have all of those things ready. And then delete things as they kick stuff in the block, right? And amend your blocks to be about whatever is being said in the 2NC 1NR. Right, so before the 2NC starts, you should almost basically have your 1AR ready. Again, not perfectly. You are going to need to amend your argument so you have actually responded to what the other team has said. And I'm a huge fan of a lot of that being done on the flow. And when I say on the flow, I mean literally on your piece of paper that you are flowing with, as opposed to just like typing it out. But whatever works for you. But all of that means you should save prep time. It is so unstrategic to use 9 minutes of prep for the 1AR. Because guess what that 2N's doing? Prepping their 2NR. Right? Blocks happened. The neg's like, cool. Pretty sure I know what I'm going for. Obviously, it's going to change a little bit depending on what the 1AR says, but I'm a smart, good 2N who has figured out what my strategy is going to be before the debate starts. The 2AC was like fine on this thing. I'm pretty sure we got them. I'm going to start writing out my 2NR in the 9 minutes of prep time that the app has given me. Thanks, app. Versus if the 1AR can only take like 1, maybe 2 minutes of prep, then you've obfuscated the neg's ability to do that. You have made their life so much more difficult. Right? I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself as a debater, like, oh, we're doing this thing. I'm a little bit confused about some piece on it. Thank God the 1A is going to take 6 minutes of prep so I can spend that time reading through the cards and making sure that I actually understand what's going on. Right? Stop the 2N from doing that. Don't use all of your prep time for the 1AR. Save it for the 2AR, which, by the way, if the 2AR now suddenly has 6 or 7 minutes of prep time, they can write out the top of their speech so it is literally perfect and make it impossible for the neg to win. you have then done the second thing you're supposed to do as a 1A, which is happy face, the AF. And remember that you're not going for everything in the 1AR, right? You're only extending at most 2 to 3 arguments, sometimes even 1 if you're just like, nah, I'm right about this. As a result, then it becomes way easier to prep your 1AR early. In fact, the world we live in, where everyone posts everything on the wiki and disclosure is generally pretty good, is awesome for this practice, because you could prep your 1AR before the debate starts, right? If you're debating a team and you know that they love going for the politics disad, you know, they've gone for it both of their previous 2NRs, they put their docs on the wiki, you can read the cards that they're almost certainly going to read in the debate in pre-round, and then start to amend your 1AR blocks to respond to what is almost certainly going to be that 1NR. Right? Maybe you're wrong. Maybe they extend something else. Maybe they read one card that's different, and so you have to change things a little bit. But like, oh my God, consider how much time you've saved. Consider how much easier you've made your life and your 2A's life if you actually use pre-round to effectively prepare your 1AR. Because we live in a world where you can do that. Right? This also means that I think you should write a lot of 1AR blocks. Right? The file that I used when I was debating was about 125 pages long. But yeah, this also goes along with what I said before. You as a 1A need to be involved with affirmative prep time. Excuse me, a preparation of the affirmative. You should also have your impact defense file up and ready to go. Right, that one's a little bit harder to predict sometimes, right? People swap out impact scenarios for DAs. But, you know, have it ready to go. Theory is your friend. Theory is your friend. 2Ns hate to answer theory and always freak out about it. If you and the 1AR can successfully extend conditionality in 15 to 20 seconds, then the 2N that you're debating is going to be like, eek, oh no. Right? Because we all just have this weird relationship to theory where we just like think it's this foreign object that can't ever possibly be understood. I don't know. I don't really get it. I have this feeling too, though. So like, I understand kind of, but either way, it means you can scare that 2N a lot. Now, please don't get me wrong. This needs to be a complete argument, right? Do not just stand up and be like, conditionality is bad, strat skew, time allocation can't be F. Like, that's not an argument. I don't care about that. I, as a judge, am not even writing those words down. I do not care if the 2N drops it. I'm not voting on that. Right, but you can, in 15 seconds, effectively extend one of your impacts to conditionality and use it as a response to their answers to conditionality, or say that it filters or frames how the judge reads all the negative arguments. Now, admittedly, again, 15 seconds on condo, probably not the 2AR move, right? The 2NR would have to like really mess that up to be the move. But again, we're making the 2N's life difficult. If you want to go for theory, you should have more time on it in the 1AR. I think like, I'm a huge fan of like a good 45 seconds to a minute on theory in the 1AR, if that's the strategy. But I think it's worthwhile to extend even if it's not really the strategy. Yeah, I rambled a lot about 1AR blocks, and that included most of the last bit of what I was going to say. So, anyone have any questions? Because otherwise I'm done. Yeah, what's your name?
Elliot.
Elliot.
So how would you So like your like extend answer reads, does that change at all when you're doing like the one-off K debates at all, or like a KF?
I do not think so.
Okay,
I don't know if that's probably a hot take in the year of our Lord 2024, but I 100% think that even if you're reading a KF, you're not topical, you are like the most radical leftist move that you can be. I 100% think you should be organized and follow this kind of model in the 1AR. Yeah, the follow up.
For number 4 of like your explanation of what the linear should look
Yeah.
like, would the that's why be like the answer to whatever neg argument answered whatever 2AC argument it was?
No, sorry, that's why is the author. So you're referencing the card that you've read. I guess to clarify, I should have made this clear, and I'm glad you asked this question. Thank you. Is either this should be your answer, or if it's not really the answer, then here is where you want to put your explicit they said, but kind of thing.
Okay.
Sorry, I definitely should have said that earlier. Yeah, but ideally, when you're doing this claim and warrant explanation, you're already doing this. Especially in the 1AR, because again, time concerns. What else? No other questions at all? Okay. All right, well, hopefully this helps that you are, good to go on 1ARs. Have fun, go out there, make 2N's lives difficult, make your 2A's lives easy.